Hey folks, and welcome back to another episode of Straight Talk Whiskey. This is episode number 49, and I'm Nick as always, and thanks especially for joining us on this episode because it is our 1 year anniversary of doing weekly whiskey reviews. So we thank you for tagging along over this past year, or if you're just new tuning in, we certainly appreciate that, and looking forward to another good year of doing some good quality reviews of some good quality whiskey, hopefully. So, let's get into what we're talking about today, which is Maker's 46. And if you've seen any of the commercials or ads, it's the bold side of Maker's, as they say. So, basically, what they did is the chairman of Maker's Mark was fielding a lot of questions about, are you ever going to come out with something new, a different line, and that sort of thing. And he was hesitant at first, but so they looked into making basically a whiskey that tasted good was obviously the first priority. So what they did is they took a full barrel of Maker's Mark, and they took some French oak staves and they put them inside the whiskey, and they found that after hundreds or 100 plus trial and error experiments there, that if they seared the French oak staves that they put into the barrel. Now, if you're not sure what that is, just think of it as tiny strips of wood, basically, that are inserted into the barrel. You might know Jack Daniel's Sinatra whiskey, and that is basically what they've done with that, is they've added staves into the barrel. What that does is that gives more interaction between the wood and the spirit. So you're going to get some more of those notes that primarily the wood imparts into the whiskey. So anyway, they found that if they seared these staves, that they could lock in the real occasionally harsh and bitter tannins that are in the wood. And they could lock those in so as to any further aging with those staves in it wouldn't give it any harsh wood tannin sense that was over and not enjoyable. Certainly a good amount of it in balance is fine, and we experience that a lot when we're tasting whiskey, because obviously the interaction between wood and spirit is paramount. So, anyway, they figured out, now, standard aging period of Maker's Mark is 5 to 6 years. They're tasting it constantly, as are most other distilleries, to see when it's right. There's no exact time frame for when it's going to be ready. And most quality distilleries are going to be tasting it to see when it's ready, and will only bottle it once it is so. So that's good to know. Now, the Maker's 46, they add these French oak staves in the wintertime, sort of a slower period in the whiskey aging, and that stays there for about 10 weeks, I believe, and they house it in the lowest reaches of their warehouses, which obviously is the coldest. So you've got that nice slow interaction, and basically what they wanted to achieve was a little bit higher sort of volatility of these vanilla, caramel, oak notes. And as always, you've got the hand-dipped traditional wax seal on top, which is always fun to see. It's always nice to know that as big as Maker's Mark is, you've got somebody, or rather a couple people, in the process of doing so, hand-dipping these in, and I personally would like to see it myself, obviously in person, because there's definitely differences when you see it, but the art in which they've learned to do it is pretty phenomenal, so hats off to them, too. Now, this is bottled at 46% ABV, so 92 proof, a little bit higher than we're used to, the standard 80 proof, so that's always good. So let's take a look at the color here. You'll notice, maybe if you have a bottle of the standard entry-level Makers, that this has got a little bit more rich, coppery tone to it, which is really nice, and definitely it's that further interaction with the wood, with the oak staves added in for that 10-week period after the Maker's Mark has been aged fully already. So let's go in for the nose. Definitely the first thing that you get is the wood influence. There's definitely this really rich, and I know they were trying to lock it in, but there's those wood tannins in there. It smells like, you definitely get a sense of the wood that's been in there, and that's certainly the case with bourbons when they're making it with new oak barrels. You can definitely get the sense of, freshly cut wood or something like that, like a tree that's just been cut down, and it's got these really just earthy, just raw, woody notes to it. But undercurring that and sort of smoothing out the palate is the nice vanilla and caramel that they were going for. They hit the nail on the head with this one. I mean, that's what they wanted, that's their intention, and that's what they got in the product, which is why you see another Maker's Mark line out there. Now there's a cask strength version out there, which I'll have to try at some point, because that, I'm sure, is phenomenal as well. Let's go in for the taste. Now, whereas on the nose, initially what I got was the heavy wood oak influences. Here, I'm getting a real nice, just straight drive through there. There's no jumbling, no randomness to it. It's a nice linear path where you got this nice spices, nice fruit, rich fruits, some dried fruits in there, but then a nice smooth undercurrent of vanilla, and certainly the raw wood oak influences. I would attribute that mostly to the spices that I'm tasting in here, but certainly very nice, very easy flowing, and like I said, it's on one train track. I mean, if you're in left or right, it'll take you on the journey. Now, I think definitely this, as a product, as another line away from their standard makers, the standard entry, was definitely a success, in the sense that you have the staple flavors of Maker's Mark elevated. And that's not only because of the higher proof, but it's because of the way they've chosen to finish it with these French oak staves for the additional 10 weeks in the wintertime in the lowest reaches of the warehouse. So definitely very smart in how they've done this. It wasn't just sort of, oh, we'll age it a little longer, we'll throw it somewhere else sort of thing, so just, sort of on a whim sort of thing. They thought about it, and they brought in some people who were, really experts in oak staves, independent staves, and that sort of thing, and all that knowledge and wherewithal on the product definitely has shown through with the 46. So, now, in terms of the finish, what you're left with is sort of the oak and the wood tannins that I was talking about before. It's not an overly long finish, but it's comforting, it's warm. The caramel that's in there too is sort of how we get the texture of the palate of the whiskey, is just this nice, smooth caramel, just savory, really delicious, and definitely hats off to Maker's Mark for elevating a very sort of basic entry-level product into something that's not only pretty reasonable in terms of cost. I think I got this for around $32 or something like that, so not too bad. Now, I must say that I'm not really a big Maker's Mark drinker, so I haven't really had any experience with Maker's Mark in the past. It just wasn't something that I was drawn to initially. Initially, I was drawn to Jack Daniels, if you remember some of the earlier reviews, that I've done a lot of those. So getting into Maker's Mark via the 46 is definitely a great a great way to get into it, especially if you haven't had it before, because it'll give you a really nice sense of what they're doing there at that distillery in Kentucky. So, just really wonderful. Now, I will also say, for them, is their website and their marketing and advertising, that sort of thing, is phenomenal. I know they've recently been doing a coat, and trying to collect coats and stuff like that for those in need during the winter and harsh cold temperatures around here, which is great. But also, really interesting was their ambassador program that I looked up. Now, I saw that and I was like, okay, it's another sort of ploy to get you to buy a whole barrel or something like that, that's going to cost upwards of $9,000-$10,000. So I was like, okay. But something, I don't know what it was, I just decided to click on it to see a little bit more of what they were asking. I think it was the price that I was trying to look for to see how much theirs was in comparison to like Jack Daniels or something like that, who also sell their barrels to those who have that kind of money. So I looked into it, but it's actually totally different than what I thought. So you can go onto their site, and there's no paid sort of product placement here, but I just thought it was interesting, and for a company to be doing this, I thought it was great. But so what you do is you go in, and as they're filling barrels with spirit and putting them away into the warehouse, they will take your name or a little line or nickname or something like that, and they will actually put it onto a barrel for you, which I thought was phenomenal. And I'm thinking like, oh, how much is this going to cost? Like, just crazy. But actually, it's free. So all you have to do is sign up. You give them a little bit of info, your email address, that sort of thing, and they will put your name on basically your very own barrel. Now, it's not your whiskey in there. You're not going to get the whole barrel, obviously, because people need to pay for that sort of thing. But I thought it was interesting because you could go, if you're touring, let's say, just Maker's Mark independently, or if you're on the Kentucky Bourbon Trail, something like that, you make a stop there that you can go in and sample some whiskey from your barrel, basically, which I thought was really neat. So we're on there, Straight Talk Whiskey / Nick. So if I ever get a chance to go down there, hopefully in June, we're going to make a trip. We're going to do sort of a mini segment on the Kentucky Bourbon Trail and do maybe a little mini review from each of those distilleries and sort of just give you a first-hand look at some of those, or how, first of all, how the Kentucky Bourbon Trail works if you're looking into doing that whole thing. I hear it takes about 3 days. You might do a little bit longer, but it'll be a 3-day ordeal, so expect there to be a straight 1, 2, 3 shot of whiskey reviews in a row. So that's really interesting. So let's go in for the score. I don't want to keep you too long here. So for the Maker's Mark 46, we'll give it not a 46, that would be rude. Let's go for a generous score of 87 out of 100. So that's episode 49. Next week we'll be here for episode number 50. Getting up there in another milestones. It's always good. And as always, drink responsibly, and we'll see you next time.